Hi guys, and welcome back to another YouTube video. In this video I'll be going through my AFL ladder predictions for this year and how a lot of teams will slide. I think there's going to be a lot of movement as we've had a lot of changes in coaches and a lot of new shifts in a lot of the top tier talent this year in the trade period, so it should shift a lot of the teams around, make teams more contenders, make teams in almost a tanking mode. So before we get to that, remember to like and subscribe. This channel's growing really well at the moment, and let's see if we can get it to grow a little bit faster and before the AFL season starts, and that'll give me more, hope in that I can produce videos that people want to see, and then we can go from there. So now let's move on to the ladder. I've got it here 18th to 1st, and we'll go in that order, and then we'll see who I have in those positions and why. So in 18th, I have GWS, and I don't think they'll be that good this year. They've lost a little bit of experience, but not too much, and they weren't the best last year, and I do think that a lot of players will start to think about going home and other things, and they haven't really got a good, core around them, and I think it will just create almost this toxic change room that they've had pretty much the last couple of years, and I don't think they'll do terribly well, and I think you'll see other Victorians, I don't necessarily know who, but I think you'll see another couple go the next year and the next year, and it'll be almost constant players wanting out. North, I don't think there's much Alistair Clarkson can do for North. There's only so much he can do, and I think with the way that West Coast have had injuries to their senior guys, and they're still there at the club, and they're going to come back, and those guys are premiership players, so they'll go up the ladder more than I think North will with their young guys. I think North are still 2 or 3 years away from actually competing well in that sort of Carlton bracket of 9th, 8th, around that area. So we got them there, and I think they brought in some good experience, but it's not top tier talent. It's more of all the guys that first 22 players that they brought in, like Logue, you want as that bottom of the end of the 22 type talent, and they're more of that mid. So there's about 10 or so players that I think need to be sort of upgraded just fractionally, and then they'll be there and thereabouts. As well as new coaching, Clarkson should do a lot better than Noble and other coaches that they had. Next up, I have Hawthorn, and I think Hawthorn is an interesting one because they've a lot of teams have them a little bit higher than I probably would, and I'll probably catch some flack for having them this low. But it's just the fact that they lost something like 1,000 games of experience, 1,100 games of experience in Mitchell, O'Meara, Gunston. I'm pretty sure I missed someone else, and they only really gained back Amon, I'm pretty sure. So it's pretty hard to put them any higher considering they lost a majority of their ball-winning, hard-winning midfield. And I think they really got rid of a lot of their good, users of the ball. They're more efficient players. I guess that comes hopefully with experience for a lot of players. So they lost a lot of that, and I think their new midfield probably won't get it the most compared to other teams. They'll be already lower in the actually getting disposals, and then they'll be pretty low on efficiency. I don't have high hopes in the likes of Warple, and I think he'll be even taken out of the side pretty quickly. Next up, I have West Coast at 15, and like I was saying, I think they will jump up a little bit. I don't think they'll be as bad as they were. They were pretty bad last year. They got thumped in pretty much most games, and they somehow beat, I believe it was Collingwood, so they really only won one. They won one game outside of that, and they even had like a waffle side out there. Effectively, some weeks, some guys were walking to the ground just being in Melbourne, and I swear they got called up or whatever. It was bad times around there for injury, COVID, and some other stuff, and yeah, they just really were bad. So next up, I have St Kilda, and I think St Kilda's just in that stage where they didn't really draft someone that's gonna take them up a level in that of Philippou. Like, he will in the future, but I don't think it'll be this year, especially him playing that half forward role. It'll take him a year or two to get into the system and be really really meaningful. It's not like a Dacos or an Ashcroft that will hit from day one and they'll be good. I think Philippou will come out and be one of the best in the draft class. It will just be that it will take him until he's 21, 22 for him to really see that, that form. And I think he will be one that transitions into the midfield, but it'll be a couple of years. It'll be when he's 21, 22 rather than when he's 18, 19. Next in this list, I sort of have them in, I guess you could almost say purgatory in Essendon. They're not good enough necessarily to get a top draft pick, but they're not bad enough to get into, not good enough to get into the 8 and not bad enough to get a good draft pick, sorry. I'm messing up my words. And what do they have? They have one of the Scott brothers now coaching them, which should do better. I mean, he somehow got North to a final back in the day when they weren't really that good. So that's Essendon, and I think they're just, Sardis will come in, and will he play round 1? Isn't he injured? I'm pretty sure. But he probably won't play round 1. But he'll come in throughout the season, and then he'll make their midfield better. If he does play in the midfield. I'm not too caught up with Essendon, as they're not really fancy friendly other than Merritt, McGrath and Parrish. So there's not many guys or Setterfield, there's not many guys you have to look into that much, and the team's not really going to be that challenging, I guess. Somehow they'll find a way to probably beat Sydney or Geelong or some team like that, and then they'll lose to GWS, because that's the way Essendon goes. Next up, I actually have, Adelaide, as I think you'll see them, what are they, around the same position as they were last year? Maybe a little bit lower than they were last year. I think you'll see them jump up a little bit. I think they're still 1 year out, but if there was to be one team to really jump into the 8, I think it would be one of the Adelaide sides, as they are, one of them is, Port is very, I guess, returning back to what they were a couple of years ago in those, when they made it to the prelims, and Adelaide's definitely on the rise. I see a similar arc to that of Sydney, in that they've missed the last couple of years. Well, they've missed the finals a lot, but they're coming back, and they've missed it the last couple of years, and they really could make that step this year. If they were to be, they could easily be that side that just gets that easy fixture that has grown a lot in the off-season and really jumps this year. So that's them. And who's next? Is it Western Bulldogs? So Western Bulldogs, I have jumping down a lot. I think Dunkley meant a lot to their midfield compared to what other people, a lot of what I think we saw last year, in that I think you will see, their main midfield is still going to be McRae, Bont, Bazza, and who am I missing? Liberatore. But I think Dunk just made it a lot easier for that rotation to happen. And I do think that their forward tools will not necessarily work. I think the most you can go for is 3. So I think they will, I guess, struggle in, if they get any wet games, I think they'll struggle. And just because a lot of that team's going to rely on marking, and they're not going to be able to really mark that well in the wet. So if they get a couple of wet games, you can pretty much cancel them out you can pretty much almost say that they're not going to score more than 60 or 70 in the wet, to be honest, as they don't have the small forwards really. And yeah, I don't see them doing too well. I think they were basically hanging on to the 8 last year, and I think they do make that drop down. Next in the ladder I have is the Gold Coast Suns. I think they do improve slightly, as they're sitting currently in 10th for me, and I think they'll stay around about that place. I do think that you will see a little bit of a drop off in a lot of in some other teams around them, so it will help them a little bit. You'll see they will improve with Wits being a full preseason, so I think they might win an extra game or two, but they're going to miss out on the 8 just because there's so many other competitive teams around them. One thing that it's quite hard to, I guess, please all the fan bases in this, as I've just realised going back through the teams that my next team could make the 4, but I have them in 9th place, and that's Fremantle. So it's pretty hard because I've seen one week I'm like they're going to make 5th to 8th. They might even slide into the 4 if we get a huge season from Brayshaw, but there's just so many teams ahead of them that I think are going to jump and sort of be there. And so Fremantle's the, I guess, unlucky one to miss out. Next, we've got Port, and they're in 8th. And I just think they're going to be it's going to be their final year with all their players. And I do think this will be the last year of them doing well, I guess, and I do think that they will drop down the ladder after this year. I just think it's going to almost be one last go for Hinkley, and then he'll be done if he doesn't, I guess, almost win it all this year, because Port's, I guess, you're losing Boak, you've lost Gray the year before, you lost Gray in the last year, so there's a couple players that are leaving, that are retiring, so it's going to be pretty hard, as well as you got other teams that are coming up the ladder with youth and stuff, in that I expect Adelaide probably to make the 8 next year or the year after. You got Gold Coast always there and thereabouts. Western Bulldogs will probably be there and thereabouts next year, and then one of the other 6 teams could easily jump up, and that's how you get Port probably dropping massively next year. Then in 7th, I've got Collingwood. This will probably surprise a lot, but I just think with them getting a couple of tougher games, as well as they're going to come into the season without, I guess, the momentum that they had throughout the whole of last year, which sort of helped them to get to that. What did they get to? The prelim? What were they? 1 kick away from the grand final almost. So they were really good last year, but I do think they sort of clung on to that momentum of winning a game every week by under a goal, and I think it almost got into the opposition's head that, when they're close, it almost feels inevitable that the game's going to be won by them. So I think this year they come into it with almost a fresh slate, and they got to win those tougher games. And I don't think Mitchell helps them necessarily in the midfield as much as I think people will. It almost contradicts what I was saying in the Mitchell video, but I think he'll do well in fantasy because he'll be able to get the possessions, but I just don't think it will help the Collingwood way in which they're so fast paced that he'll be able to help them terribly much. So that's why I have them slipping down a little bit. They'll still be there, and I think they'll probably win the elimination final against against the team I have coming up next, but I think they lose to the loser out of one of the top 4 team that they face. So they'll go to there, then they'll rebuild the next year as I think this probably will be Pendlebury's last year. I'm not 100% certain, but losing Pendlebury the next year might see them drop a little bit, but I guess we'll wait and see. Then I've got Richmond up in 6th. And Richmond's going to be quite a hard one to predict. I do think they probably make the 8, but it's whether I've seen some people putting them in the top 4. I've seen some people putting them 8th, 7th. So I think putting them 6th is almost middle ground. And I think with them, it's going to be quite interesting to see how their midfield runs, because Taranto likes to get a lot of possessions. and it's going to be pretty hard because not many people in the Richmond system get really good possessions. It's more of a fast-paced system like that of Collingwood. So it's quite hard for one individual to rack up the disposals that much. It's more about tackling and pressure. So will we see Taranto do well at Richmond? I do think he will do well. Will we see him do what he did at at GWS with some of those seasons? I don't think we'll see that. I think we'll see a new form of Taranto, but I think it will help. Him and Hopper will help just iron out this midfield for Richmond, which will see them jump up the ladder a little bit, I think, or were they round about that same place? Then I've got the big mover in that of Carlton coming into the, I guess, 5th. They were 9th last year, so jumping up this much. It's just a case of now or never, I guess, with Carlton. If they don't make it this year, they're not really going to stand a chance, are they, to make it? As they have arguably the best 2 forwards of the last 2 or 3 seasons in Curnow and Mackay. They've got the Brownlow Medalist, debatably. I don't know how he won that, as well as he's not necessarily Cripps. He should have been rubbed out, in my opinion, as well as the fact that he also isn't probably necessarily the best player in the comp. It's just the fact that there was not many other people in the midfield to always take votes off him. I think Oliver's probably the best player in the comp. It's just that he has Petrarca and Gawn that take off votes pretty regularly. So he might have pretty consistent games, but he's always going to only get 2 votes in games rather than 3 because one of Petrarca, Gawn, or sometimes it was Bailey Fritz and other players to have a great game, and it's they take the 3 votes off of him. So next up, I've got Sydney, and this probably is a little bit biased, but I do think you do have to look at the fact that they are pretty young compared to a lot of the other sides that have gone to grand finals, and I just think they're building. They didn't really lose anything last year. No key players went out. Yes, you could say Kennedy retired, but he was basically a coach from round 7 or 8 onwards, I'm pretty sure. So they didn't really lose anything. And a lot of their players, no players really getting to that age now where it's okay, you can retire in the next year or so, I don't think. From memory, other than basically Lance Franklin, but I think you'll see a swap over between Lance and McDonald in that. I think they'll both kick roughly the same amount of goals, just because McDonald will play all 22 games and Lance will only play 16 or 17, and then McDonald will get full-time, I guess, that number 1 full forward status when Buddy retires, I'm expecting after this year. So I have them dropping, 1 place or so in the 4, and they'll probably have to go into the they'll probably lose first week, and then they'll have to go against the winner of one of those 2 games, and not necessarily which one wins it, but which one they play. Either it's 5 versus 8 or 6 versus 7. I'm not 100% sure who they play, but we'll see. And I think they will probably win that game and then lose in the prelim. I'm not 100%, but they'll lose in the final 4 game, and they'll get a good return. It won't be necessarily obviously the heights of what they did last year up until the last game where they collapsed, but it'll be pretty good, a solitary step, and it won't be necessarily the fallback that I think other teams have had when they lose the grand final. Next one, I have Melbourne in 3rd, and I think they'll probably try and rest a little bit in the regular part of the season, and then they'll come out in the finals, and they could honestly win it with the way that Grundy and Gawn play. Grundy's actually surprised me in the preseason games of playing a lot better up forward than I thought he would, and I thought he'd be the mainstay ruck, but I think it could even be Gawn 60% in the ruck and Grundy 40%, and that will still work. You could basically tip it, just be does one player want to play in the ruck this week, one player want to play forward. Those 2 are so interchangeable that It really doesn't matter. Like, maybe Gawn's 5% better up forward, but it's not as far away as, like, it's closer than what I thought it would be. Those two in their efficiency up forward. Like, Grundy kicked 3 goals and then just didn't do anything in the second half because the game was dead against Richmond, and I don't even think he played that much. So next up, I've got Geelong, and I just think you can pretty much pencil them in for top 4. Like, I'll probably be wrong in that prediction now, but they're at least going to be in finals. I expect them probably 90% chance of being top 4, and I have them top 2 just because the way that they run the club is so good. Like, they literally lost Selwood, and they just went, yeah, we got Bowes and Clark for nothing. So I think those two guys will be in the mix to replace him in that position, as well as the fact that you've got Duncan. They picked up Tanner Brew, and they basically did everything, and they got almost a net positive from it all. So from all their trades, which was really, really weird, and I don't know how in the world some teams like Gold Coast do trading. It's like I don't even know what they're thinking when they trade. So for Geelong to do that and basically run away and pull Gold Coast pants down is pretty, I guess, funny in essence, as I think Gold Coast have again let go of a player that could easily be a top 50 player in the league this year in Bowes, or at least top 60, top 70. Not a guy that there's like 400 guys that play each week in and week out. He's definitely not going to be only top 400. He'll be like top 100 in Bowes. So they've done that in back-to-back season with Bowes and Brody. So just don't trade. They need to stop trying to just, trade away all their or what they see as bad contracts because the guys are only like 22, 23. Just let them play, honestly. And then in first, I have Brisbane. They're going to be the team to beat, I think, this year. Adding Ashcroft and Dunkley pretty much sets up their midfield and their wing position as well, as they get better rotation through there. They've got McInerney and Brooks, that's pretty good. They also added up Gunston up forward if you wanted to add any more to that team. So they got a reliable goal kicker up there, medium to tall forward as well, which helps. And I think you've got a good blend of experience in that of Neil. Lyons isn't even, I think, projected to play. You've got McCluggage there as well, who's going to take less of a role. And you just got a lot of players there and they didn't really lose anyone this season. I don't think so. So you really haven't lost anything from there. And you got the key forwards in Hipwood and Danaher hopefully healthy. So I think they're a very, very good chance of coming out and winning it all. So that's my, ladder prediction. And now if I go back to this screen and move a little bit across. So who do I think wins it all? And I think we'll see a grand final, the top 2 teams from my ladder prediction in that of Brisbane and Geelong. It's gonna be out of those 3 teams, honestly, of the top 3 of Melbourne, Brisbane and Geelong. I just think they're a little bit of ahead of the curve compared to all the other guys, all the other teams. So one of those 2, and one of those 3 will win it. And if I had to give a prediction, I'd probably say Brisbane's going to win it. And it's going to be really tight between whoever they play. I just think they have enough there, and I think Ashcroft is almost too good to be true at this point. He just looks like that pure inside mid that could almost like average 25 disposals in year 1. That's how good he's going to be. So that's that prediction. What have we got next? We've got the Coleman medal, and who do I think is going to win that? I've seen a lot of people predicting Lynch from the Tigers or Jeremy Cameron, and I think Jeremy Cameron's probably not going to win it just because I think he doesn't play enough games. And I think one of the King brothers could be up there, but I just don't think, the King brother from St Kilda, but I think he's out, so that doesn't help. So those two are probably not there. You won't see anyone from Sydney. Carlton players, I think they have to probably find another goal scorer aside from those two to kick goals. So it's going to be tough for them. And then you've got Richmond. Richmond, you have Lynch, of course. Who do I have in 7th? Collingwood won't have a major goal kicker. 8th I had was, what was it, Port, I think. Port Charlie Dixon won't. He's too old probably now to be back to his close to Coleman form that he was back a couple of years ago. So who do I think is going to win it? It's basically out of those two. I don't think Danaher or Hipwood will come out and win it, though they could, but I don't think they will. I think it's probably a safer bet just to go with Lynch this year, as I think he'll play all 22 games, and if he can even pick up his efficiency by 5 or so %, he'll kick another 5 or so goals. So I think he could easily do it. I think with there being an extra round, so you play 23 games, average 3 a game, 3.5, probably gets kicks. What's that, almost? I think he'll probably kick 75 in the regular season, 75 to 80. And then we've got the Brownlow medal, and who I think is going to win that. It's probably not going to be anyone from Melbourne, just because they take votes off each other, which is quite tough. Andy Brayshaw could be a shout from Freo. Geelong, they sort of share it around Sydney. They share it around Carlton. Cripps could go back to back, but I do think you have a lot of that midfield now that will start taking votes off each other, especially when Walsh is back. Collingwood won't have anyone unless Mitchell comes out there and just sort of does it. But that's that. And so I think you'll probably see the likes of... I think you'd probably see Andy Brayshaw or Tuke Miller win it. So I'm going to go with Andy Brayshaw, just with them being a little bit higher, I guess. So yeah, that's my video of all the predictions for this year. And I'll see you guys in another video. Bye, guys.